great tribute to the guest of honor, the king himself. Thinking this move would make him an indispensable asset, Fouquet had actually offended his master, who was outraged by the fact people were more charmed by his finance minister than by himself. Fouquet unintentionally outshone his master, making the king feel insecure. He was arrested the next day and spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement high in the Pyrenees Mountains for having stolen enormous amounts from the country's treasury. The accusations were false, but such was the price of his actions, best intentions aside. A second example would be Galileo Galilei, one of the greatest minds of the 16th century who used this law in his favor. Galileo was clever in observing this law by giving glory to his patrons. In order to solve his perennial problem of funding, he dedicated his discovery of the moons of Jupiter to the Medici, since the royal symbol of the Medici family was the planet Jupiter. He then commissioned an emblem for them, with each moon representing one of the suns who revolved around the patriarch. The Medici family became his major patron, appointing him their official court mathematician and philosopher, thereby giving him a more comfortable life and a steady salary. So what are the lessons we should take away from the misfortune of Fouquet and the brilliance of Galileo? Present your ideas in a way that they echo your boss's thought. Act less smarter than your boss. Do not take your position at work or in life for granted. Always make sure to make it seem like you want to seek the superior's expertise and advice. Discreet flattery is very powerful. Law number 2. Never put too much trust in friends. The problem about working with friends is that it confuses the boundaries and distances that working requires. If both partners in the arrangement understand the dangers involved, a friend can often be employed to great effect. You must never let your guard down in such a venture, however. Always be on the lookout for any signs of emotional disturbance, such as envy and ingratitude. Nothing is stable in the realm of power, and even the closest of friends can be transformed into the worst of enemies. In order to fully understand, let's take a look at history and learn from others' mistakes. The law has been observed with Michael of the Byzantine Empire and his friend Basilius. In the mid-9th century AD, Michael had placed too much trust in his friend Basilius. They had met a few years before when Michael had been visiting the stables just as a wild horse got loose. Basilius saved Michael's life. His strength and courage had impressed Michael, who immediately raised Basilius from the obscurity of being a horse trainer to the position of head of stable. He loaded his friend with gifts and favors until they became inseparable. Michael turned the peasant Basilius into a sophisticated and educated courtier who later on became greedy for more wealth and power and had his former benefactor and best friend Michael murdered. Michael III stakes his future on the sense of gratitude he thought Basilius must feel for him. He had created a monster. He had allowed a man to see power up close. A man who then wanted more, who asked for anything and got it, who felt encumbered by the charity he had received and simply did what many people do in such a situation. They forget the favors they have received and imagine they have earned their success by their own merits. Another example is the Song dynasty, who ruled China for 300 years. But how? I destroy my enemies when I make them my friends. Abraham Lincoln. For several centuries after the fall of the Han dynasty, 8222, Chinese history followed the same pattern of violent and bloody coups one after the other. Army men would plot to kill a weak emperor, then would replace him on the dragon throne with a strong general. The general would start a new dynasty and crown himself emperor. To ensure his own survival, he would kill off his fellow generals. A few years later, however, the pattern would resume. New generals would arise and assassinate him or his sons in their turn. To be emperor of China was to be alone, surrounded by a pack of enemies. It was the least powerful, least secure position in the realm. In 8959, General Cao Guangjin, I hope I'm saying this right, became Emperor Song. Emperor Song knew that his friends in the army would chew him up like meat, and if he somehow survived, his friends in the government would have him for supper. Emperor Song persuaded his generals to retire to a life of nobility and give up their dreams of grabbing his throne one day. He spared those who conspired against him and was able to win over enemies with his generosity. Song was finally able to break the pattern of coups, violence, and civil war. So, what can we learn from these historical events? Here are the lessons for working with friends and enemies. Friends will not openly disagree with you in order to avoid arguments. Enemies, on the other hand, expect nothing, so they will be surprised when you are generous. An enemy spared the guillotine will be more grateful to you than a friend. When you decide to hire a friend, you will discover qualities they have kept hidden. Be on the lookout for any signs of emotional disturbance such as envy and ingratitude. Skill and competence are more important than friendly feelings. Hiring friends will limit your power. All working situations require a kind of distance between people. You destroy an enemy when you make him a friend. An enemy at your heels keeps you sharp, alert, and focused. Law number 3. Conceal your intentions. Have you ever heard of a skillful general who intends to surprise a citadel announcing his plan to his enemy? Conceal your purpose and hide your progress. Do not disclose the extent of your designs until they cannot be opposed, until the combat is over. Win the victory before you declare the war. In a word, imitate those warlike people whose designs are not known except by the ravaged country through which they have passed. It takes effort to control your tongue and monitor what you reveal. It is much more prudent to tailor your words, telling people what they want to hear rather than the coarse and ugly truth of what you feel or think. More important, by being unabashedly open, you make yourself so predictable and familiar that it is almost impossible to respect or fear you, and power will not accrue to a person who cannot inspire such emotions. Train yourself in the art of concealing your intentions, master the art, and you will always have the upper hand. Our first instinct is to always trust appearances. This fact makes it relatively easy to conceal one's intentions. Let's talk about how people conceal intentions and fool you. Use decoyed objects of desire to throw people off. Support an idea or cause that is actually contrary to your own sentiments, but will help you achieve your goal. Use this tactic in the following manner. Hide your intentions not by closing up, with the risk of appearing secretive and making people suspicious, but by talking endlessly about your desires and goals, just not your real ones. You will kill 3 birds with 1 stone. You appear friendly, open, and trusting. Conceal your intentions, and you send your rivals on time-consuming wild goose chases. False sincerity. People easily mistake sincerity for honesty. Remember, their first instinct is to trust appearances, and since they value honesty and want to believe in the honesty of those around them, they will rarely doubt you or see through your act. Seeming to believe what you say gives your words great weight. Remember, the best deceivers do everything they can to cloak their roguish qualities. They cultivate an air of honesty in one area to disguise their dishonesty in others. Honesty is merely another decoy in their arsenal of weapons. Bland facial expression. Behind a bland, unreadable exterior, all sorts of mayhem can be planned without detection. This is a weapon that the most powerful men in history have learned to perfect. Noble gesture. People want to believe apparently noble gestures are genuine, for the belief is pleasant. They rarely notice how deceptive these gestures can be. Appearing to belong to a group. The tendency to mistake appearances for reality. The feeling that if someone seems to belong to your group, their belonging must be real. This habit makes the seamless blend a very effective front. The trick is simple. You simply blend in with those around you, and the better you blend in, the less suspicious you become. Remember, it takes patience and humility to dull your brilliant colors, to put on the mask of the unconspicuous. Do not despair at having to wear such a bland mask. It is often your unreadability that draws people to you and makes you appear a person of power. But how do people apply these ways to fool you? Simply dangle an object you seem to desire, a goal you seem to aim for in front of people's eyes, and they will take the appearance for reality. Once their eyes focus on the decoy, they will fail to notice what you're really up to. Politicians use this all the time. Our first historical example would be decoyed objects of desire and making a woman fall in love. The Marquis or Marquise de Sévigné was inexperienced in the art of love. He confided in the infamous courtesan of 17th century France, Ninon de Lenclon, to instruct him on how to seduce a difficult young countess. She made him follow a plan over a number of weeks, where the Marquis would be appearing in public always surrounded by beautiful women in the very places the Countess would be expected to see him. He was supposed to assume an air of nonchalance. This increased the jealousy of the young Countess, who was not sure of his interest in her. One day the Marquis, unable to control his passion, broke from Ninon's plan and blurted out to the Countess that he loved her. After this admission, the Countess no longer found him interesting and avoided him. The whole premise of dating is based on games, wild moves, and being unpredictable. If you display your feelings too soon, it becomes an artless show of passion, a door closed that would never open again. In seduction, set up conflicting signals such as desire and indifference, and you not only throw them off the scent, you inflame their desire to possess you. Another example, Otto von Bismarck became Prime Minister of Prussia. Otto von Bismarck was a deputy in the Prussian parliament at a time when many fellow deputies thought it was possible to go to war against Austria and defeat it. Bismarck wanted to go to war, but he knew that the king was not in favor of it. He also knew the Prussian army was not prepared, so he devised a clever way. He publicly stated his praises for the Austrians and talked about the madness of war. Many deputies changed their votes. Had Bismarck announced his real intentions, arguing it was better to wait now and fight later, he would not have won. Most Prussians wanted to go to war at that moment and mistakenly believed their army to be superior to the Austrians. Had he gone to the king, his sincerity would have been doubted. By giving misleading statements about wanting peace and concealing his true purpose, Bismarck's speech catapulted him to the position of prime minister. He later had the country go to war against the Austrians at the right time when he felt the Prussian army was more capable and united with Germany. Yet another example, the Duke of Marlborough used this in the Spanish succession. During the War of the Spanish Succession in 1711, the Duke of Marlborough, head of the English army, wanted to destroy a key French fort because it protected a vital thoroughfare into France. But he knew that if he destroyed it, the French would realize what he wanted, to advance down that road. Instead, then he merely captured the fort and garrisoned it with some of his troops, making it appear as if he wanted it for some purpose of his own. The French attacked the fort and the Duke let them recapture it. Once they had it back, they destroyed it, figuring that the Duke had wanted it for some important reason. Now that the fort was gone, the road was unprotected and Marlborough could easily march into France. What else? Henry Kissinger used bland face to win opponents. Henry Kissinger bore his opponents around the negotiating table for years with his monotonous voice, his blank look, his endless recitations of details. Then, as their eyes glazed over, he would suddenly hit them with a list of bold terms. Caught off guard, they would be easily intimidated. As one poker manual explains it, while playing his hand, the good player is seldom an actor. Instead, he practices a bland behavior that minimizes readable terms, frustrates and confuses opponents, permits greater concentration. Spies use appearing to belong to a group method. During the Cold War of the 1950s and 60s, as is now notorious, a slew of British civil servants passed secrets to the Soviets. They went undetected for years because they were apparently decent chaps, had gone to all the right schools and fit the old boy network perfectly. Law number 4. Always say less than necessary. There are times when it is unwise to be silent. Silence can arouse suspicion and even insecurity, especially in your superior. A vague or ambiguous comment can open you up to interpretations you had not bargained for. Silence and saying less than necessary must be practiced with caution, then and in the right situations. Let us take a look at 6 ways to exert more power by practicing listening. Make people reveal more about themselves. Speaking less will make people reveal more about themselves. This is information you may be able to use against them later on. Your short answers and silences will put them on the defensive and they will jump in, nervously filling the silence with all kinds of comments that will reveal valuable information about them and their weaknesses. The longer you listen, the more others move their lips and teeth. As they move their lips and teeth, you can thereby understand their real intentions. People listen and interpret your every word carefully. Speaking less will force people to listen and interpret your every word carefully. Your silence will make other people uncomfortable. Humans are machines of interpretation and explanation. They have to know what you're thinking. When you carefully control what you reveal, they cannot pierce your intentions or your meaning. They will leave a meeting with you and they will go home and ponder your every word. This extra attention to your brief comments will only add to your power. Masters of Enigma Andy Warhol and Marcel Duchamp knew the power of saying less and keeping people guessing. The less Duchamp talked about his work, the more it was talked about in the art circles. Andy Warhol recognized it was hard to talk people into doing what you wanted, so when interviewed, he would give vague and ambiguous answers and let the interviewer find his own interpretation. Number 3. Once the words are out, you cannot take them back. Keep them under control. Be particularly careful with sarcasm. The momentary satisfaction you gain with your biting words will be outweighed by the price you pay. Number 4. The more you say, the more common you appear. When you're trying to impress people with words, the more you say, the more common you appear and the less in control. Even if you're saying something banal, it will seem original if you make it vague, open-ended, and sphinx-like. Number 5. Saying less will keep you from saying something foolishly dangerous. Around 454 BC, Coriolanus was a great military hero of ancient Rome. People held him in awe. He decided to run for the Senate and he spoke his mind, hardly able to control his arrogance and boastfulness. He slandered and insulted people. The more speeches he made, the less people respected him. He suffered the people's wrath and was eventually banished from the city. Number 6. People will not deceive you as they will never know your position. Louis XIV was a man of very few words. His infamous "I shall see" was one of several extremely short phrases that he would apply to all manner of requests. Louis was not always this way. As a young man, he was known for talking at length, delighting in his own eloquence. His latest taciturnity was self-imposed, an act, a mask he used to keep everybody below him off balance. No one knew exactly where he stood or could predict his reactions. No one could try to deceive him by saying what they thought he wanted to hear, because no one knew what he wanted to hear. As they talked on and on to the silent Louis, they revealed more and more about themselves. Information he would later use against them to great effect. In the end, Louis' silence kept those around him terrified and under his tongue. It was one of the foundations of his power. As Saint Simon wrote, no one knew as well as he how to sell his words, his smile, and even his glances. Everything in him was valuable because he created differences, and his majesty was enhanced by the sparseness of his words. Saying less than necessary is not for kings and statesmen only. In most areas of life, the less you say, the more profound and mysterious you appear. By saying less than necessary, you create the appearance of meaning and power. Also, the less you say, the less risk you run of saying something foolish. Law number 5. So much depends on reputation. Guard it with your life. Reputation is the cornerstone of power. In the social realm, appearances are the barometer of almost all our judgments. Your reputation will protect you in the dangerous game of appearances, distracting the probing eyes of others from knowing what you really like, and giving you a degree of control over how the world judges you. A powerful position to be in. Why is reputation important? A strong reputation increases your presence and exaggerates your strengths without you having to spend much energy. It can also create an aura around you that will instill respect, even fear. In the fighting in the North African desert during World War II, the German general Erwin Rommel had a reputation for cunning and deceptive maneuvering that struck terror into everyone who faced him. Even when his forces were depleted and the British tanks outnumbered his by 5-1, entire cities would be evacuated at the news of his approach. As they say, your reputation inevitably precedes you, and if it inspires respect, a lot of your work is done for you before you arrive on the scene or utter a single word. During China's War of the Three Kingdoms AD 207 to 265, General Liang was able to fool his rival Sima Yi simply by letting his track record for being an undefeated leader in battle do the work for him. Liang's troops were far outnumbered by Sima Yi's, yet he devised a clever last resort plan. Liang donned a Taoist robe and laid the loot upon the wall of the city he was defending. His soldiers opened the gates and hid. When Sima Yi's troops advanced upon the unguarded city, he recognized his opponent sitting alone upon the wall. Fearing a trap, Sima Yi told his soldiers to retreat. How do you build a reputation? In the beginning, you must work to establish a reputation for one outstanding quality, whether generosity or honesty or cunning. This quality sets you apart and gets other people to talk about you. You then make your reputation known to as many people as possible, and watch as it spreads like wildfire. Do this subtly. Take care to build slowly and with a firm foundation. Reputation is a treasure to be carefully collected and hoarded, especially when you are first establishing it. You must protect it strictly, anticipating all attacks on it. Make your reputation simple and base it on one sterling quality. This single quality, efficiency say, or seductiveness, becomes a kind of calling card that announces your presence and places others under a spell. A reputation for honesty will allow you to practice all manner of deception. Casanova used his reputation as a great seducer to pave the way for his future conquests. Women who had heard of his powers became immensely curious and wanted to discover for themselves what had made him so romantically successful. We'll cover 4 ways to safeguard and grow your reputation. Number 1. Never appear desperate in your self-defense against the slander of others. Do not let yourself get angry or defensive at the slanderous comments of your enemies. It reveals insecurity, not confidence in your reputation. Take the high road instead and never appear desperate in your self-defense. Number 2. Sow doubt and spread rumors about your rival. An attack on other man's reputation is a potent weapon, particularly when you have less power than he does. He has much more to lose in such a battle, and your own thus far small reputation gives him a small target when he tries to return your fire. P.T. Burnham used such campaigns to great effect in his early career, but this tactic must be practiced with skill. You must not seem to engage in petty vengeance. If you do not break your enemy's reputation cleverly, you will inadvertently ruin your own. Even if they deny it, people will still be wondering why they are so defensive. Burnham used this tactic to ruin his competition's Peel's reputation by sowing doubts about Peel's museum stability and solence. Doubt is a powerful weapon. Once you let it out of the bag with insidious rumors, your opponents are in a horrible dilemma. On the one hand, they can deny the rumors, even prove that you have slandered them, but a layer of suspicion will remain. Why are they defending themselves so desperately? Maybe the rumor has some truth to it. If on the other hand they take the high road and ignore you, the doubts will be even stronger. If done correctly, the sowing of rumors can so infuriate and unsettle your rivals that in defending themselves, they will make numerous mistakes. This is the perfect weapon for those who have no reputation of their own to work from. Number 3. If you go too far in attacking another's reputation, it draws more attention to your wrongfulness than to the other person who has slandered it. Thomas Edison considered the inventor of hardness electricity, believed that a workable system would have to be based on direct current and DC. When the Serbian scientist Nikola Tesla appeared to have succeeded in creating a system based on alternating current, AC, Edison was furious. He determined to ruin Tesla's reputation by making the public believe that the AC system was inherently unsafe, and Tesla irresponsible in promoting it. To this end, he captured all kinds of household pets and electrocuted them to death with an AC current. When this wasn't enough, in 1890 he got New York State prison authorities to organize the world's first execution by electrocution using an AC current. But Edison's electrocution experiments had all been with small creatures. The charge was too weak and the man was only half killed. In perhaps the country's crudest state-authorized execution, the procedure had to be repeated. It was an awful spectacle. Although in the long run it is Edison's name that has survived, at the time his campaign damaged his own reputation more than Tesla. He backed off. The lesson is simple. Never go too far in attacks like these, for that will draw more attention to your own wrongfulness than to the person you are slandering. Number 4. Use humor or gentle mockery at your rival's expense. When your own reputation is solid, use subtle tactics such as satire and ridicule to weaken your opponent while making you out as a charming rogue. The mighty lion toys with the mouse that crosses his path. Any other reaction would mar his fearsome reputation. Once Burnham did have a reputation on his own, he used a fake hypnotism demonstration. He ridiculed his rival Peel's reputation. He was extremely successful. Once you have a solid base of success, ridiculing your opponent puts him on the defensive and draws more attention to you, enhancing your own reputation. Outright slander and insult are too strong at this point. They are ugly and may hurt you more than help you. But gentle humor and mockery suggest that you have a strong enough sense of your own worth to enjoy a good laugh at your rival's expense. A humorous fun can make you out as a harmless entertainer while poking holes in the reputation of your rival. How do you improve a bad reputation? Perhaps you have already stained your reputation, but it is prevented from establishing a new one. In such cases, it is wise to associate with someone whose image counteracts your own, using their good name to whitewash and elevate yours. It is hard, for example, to erase a reputation for dishonesty by yourself, but a paragon of honesty can help. When P.T. Burnham wanted to clean up a reputation for promoting vulgar entertainment, he brought the singer Jenny Lind over from Europe. She had a stellar high-class reputation, and the American tour Burnham sponsored for her greatly enhanced his own image. Similarly, the great robber barons of 19th century America were long unable to rid themselves of a reputation for cruelty and mean spirit. Only when they began collecting art, so that the names of Morgan and Frick became permanently associated with those of Da Vinci and Rembrandt, courted attention at all costs. The ostentation could be seen. What is not seen is as though it did not exist. It was light that first caused our creation to shine forth. Display fills up many blanks, covers up deficiencies, and gives everything a second life, especially when it is backed by genuine merit. Balthazar Judge. Everything is judged by its appearance. What is unseen counts for nothing. Never let yourself get lost in the crowd, dead or buried in oblivion. Stand out. Be conspicuous at all costs. Make yourself a magnet of attention by appearing larger, more colorful, more mysterious than the bland and timid masses. Why fame is important in every field of work. Burning more brightly than those around you is a skill that no one is born with. You have to learn to attract attention. At the start of your career, you must attach your name and reputation to a quality, an image that sets you apart from other people. This image can be something like a characteristic style of dress, or a personality quirk that amuses people and gets talked about. Once the image is established, you have an appearance, a place in the sky for your star. Our first historical example. The court of Louis XIV contained many talented writers, artists, great beauties, and men and women of impeccable virtue. But no one was more talked about than the singular Duc d'Alençon. The Duke was short, almost dwarfish, and he was prone to the most insolent kinds of behavior. He slept with the king's mistress, and openly insulted not only all the courtiers but the king himself. Louis, however, was so beguiled by the Duke's eccentricities that he could not bear his absence from the court. It was simple. The strangeness of the Duke's character attracted attention. Once people were entrailed by him, they wanted him around at any cost. The great scientist Edison knew that to raise money he had to remain in the public eye at any cost. Almost as important as the inventions themselves was how he presented them to the public and courted attention. Edison would design visually dazzling experiments to display his discoveries with electricity. He would talk of future inventions that seemed fantastic at the time, robots and machines that could photograph fog, and that he had no intention of wasting his energy on, but that made the public talk about him. He did everything he could to make sure that he received more attention than his great rival Nikola Tesla, who may actually have been more brilliant than he was, but whose name was far less known. In 1915, it was rumored that Edison and Tesla would be joint recipients of that year's Nobel Prize in Physics. The prize was eventually given to a pair of English physicists. Only later was it discovered that the prize committee had actually approached Edison, but he had turned them down. By that time, his fame was more secure than Tesla's, and he thought it would be better to refuse the honor than to allow his rival the attention that would have come even from sharing the prize. Let's look at 6 ways you can become famous and make your ideas more popular than the competition's. Number 1. Attack the sensational, scandalous. If you find yourself in a lowly position that offers little opportunity for you to draw attention, an effective trick is to attack the most visible, most famous, most powerful person you can find. Example of Pietro Aretino. When Aretino, a young Roman servant boy of the early 16th century, wanted to get attention as a writer of verses, he decided to publish a series of satirical works ridiculing the Pope and his affection for a pet elephant. He attacked with Aretino in the public eye immediately. A slanderous attack on a person in a position of power would have a similar effect. However, remember to use such tactics sparingly. After you have the public's attention, then the act can wear thin. Number 2. Keep reinventing yourself. Once in the limelight, you must constantly renew it by adapting and varying your method of courting attention. If you don't, the public will grow tired, will take you for granted, and will move on to a newer star. The game requires constant vigilance and creativity. Number 3. Be unpredictable. People feel superior to the person whose actions they can predict, and you you show them who is in control and playing against their expectations, you will gain their respect and tighten your hold on their fleeting attention. Pablo Picasso, the greatest painter in the world. Picasso never allowed himself to fade into the background. If his name became too attached to a particular style, he would deliberately upset the public with a new series of paintings that went against all expectations. Better to create something ugly and disturbing, he believed, than to let viewers grow too familiar with his work. Number 4. Create an air of mystery. In a world growing increasingly banal and familiar, what seems enigmatic instantly draws attention. Never make it too clear what you're doing or about to do. Do not show all your cards. An air of mystery heightens your presence. It also creates anticipation. Everyone will be watching you to see what happens next. Use mystery to beguile, seduce, even frighten. If you do not declare yourself immediately, you arouse expectation. Mix a little mystery with everything. The very mystery stirs up the narration, and when you explain, be not too explicit. In this manner you imitate the divine way when you cause men to wonder and watch. Once again. Number 5. Better to be attacked, slandered, than ignored. It is a common mistake to imagine that this peculiar appearance of yours should not be controversial, that to be attacked is somehow bad. Nothing could be further from the truth. To avoid being a flash in the pan and having your notoriety eclipsed by another, you must not discriminate between different types of attention. In the end, every kind will work in your favor. Welcome personal attacks and feel no need to defend yourself. P.T. Barnum, the greatest entertainer in the world. Burnham learned about courting attention to his favor. Any form of publicity would benefit his entertainment business, no matter if it were bad publicity. He promoted his shows of curiosities to audiences with all kinds of gimmicks. He would offer free music for millions, but hire bad musicians, so the crowd would end up buying tickets to the show so they could avoid the bands. He planted articles in newspapers and even sent anonymous letters to keep his name in the limelight. Number 6. Make yourself appear larger than life. Society craves larger-than-life figures, people who stand above the general mediocrity. Never be afraid then of the qualities that set you apart and draw attention to you. Court controversy, even scandal. It is better to be attacked, even slandered, than ignored. All professions are ruled by this law, and all professionals must have a bit of the showman about them. Law number 7. Get others into work. Use the wisdom, knowledge, and legwork of other people to further your own cause. Not only will such assistance save you valuable time and energy, it will give you much more of efficiency and speed. In the end, your helpers will be forgotten and you will be remembered. Never do yourself what others can do for you. Thomas Edison was the consumer genius of other people's efforts. After hiring a certain scientist and inventor by the name of Nikola Tesla, who worked day and night to improve Edison's antiquated invention dynamo, or as we know them today, generator, Tesla was told by Edison that he would receive $50,000 for redesigning his system of electrical current. Within a year, Tesla created an improved version of the dynamo. Instead of receiving $50,000, he was given a raise by Edison, who knew that his company would get all the credit for the work that was done by Tesla. Nikola Tesla is a prime example of what not to do. He was never credited for any of his work. He was the inventor of the alternate current system, AC, which is synonymous with Westinghouse. Financials divested Tesla from the credit, patents, and riches that he would have received, which approximates at $12 million instead of the $216,000 that he accepted as payment. He was not even acknowledged for his patent filed in 1897 when another man, Marconi, took credit for inventing the radio. Tesla is the true father of the radio. This is a sad yet true story about a man who was obsessed with his work, yet really never got the accolades or the money, nor the respect that he deserved. Edison, on the other hand, saw the requisite to hire the best in the field to do work that he himself would take credit for. This does not beg the question who would you rather be, but it is a cautionary lesson. 4 reasons why you should utilize others. Number 1. Nobody likes a rundown, burnt-out hero. If you insist on doing all the work yourself, then you will never get very far. Having someone or others to do the work for you will give you a godlike quality that others will admire. Take artist Peter Paul Rubens, for example. He assembled a vast array of outstanding artists with paint canvases so that when a client would visit Rubens' studio, it appeared to the client that Rubens was working artistry on the painting, when in essence the painting was already nearly finished. Number 2. There are some skills you do not possess. Hiring people who possess skills that you yourself lack is probably one of the wisest decisions Like in the case of artist Rubens, he hired different types of artists. One artist specialized in roses, another specialized in backgrounds, and so on. This is what enabled him to appear to be working diligently on his paintings. Although he had procured others to do these paintings, he was able to put his name on the work, thus being the genius who got the credit and the money. Number 3. Standing on the shoulders of giants can be brilliantly manipulated. Isaac Newton, a genius in his own right, made his discoveries built on the achievement of others. Shakespeare borrowed plots and other works from several writers, and we can only guess how many people plagiarized the works of Shakespeare himself. Using the knowledge of the past just makes you a clever borrower, and this in of itself is genius. Number 4. Sharing the credit with others. There is absolutely nothing wrong with sharing the credit with someone, especially when that someone is your superior. Take Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State under Richard Nixon. If it had not been for Kissinger's diplomacy, Nixon's historic visit to the People's Republic of China would not have been as successful as it was. Knowing when to hold back by not hogging the spotlight is also a talent that will be beneficial in the long term. Be wise in your decisions. Make sure that your decision is unshakable, or you will be accused of pushing people out of the limelight and deception. In other words, that you want to be associated with. Dictator culture, yes, it's easier. The hard work of others becomes where you use their failure to survive, and they become insurgents. While you are working hard, he is hovering. Do not fight in disappointment. He is vigilant, ruthless, and quiet. The qualities that you must acquire to secure credit for an investment or creation until you can make it your own. The credit for an invention is as important, if not more important, than the invention itself. Bismarck once said, "Fools say that they learn from experience. I prefer to profit by others' experience." Law number 7. Make other people come to you. Use bait if necessary. When you force the other person to act, you are the one in control. It is always better to make your opponent come to you, abandoning his own plans in the process. Lure him with fabulous gains, then attack. You hold the cards. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand, the foreign minister to Napoleon, can attest to this caveat. Talleyrand was a mastermind manipulator who was behind the dramatic escape of Napoleon after his exile to the island of Elba. Talleyrand knew that Napoleon's arrogance was his weakness, and he played to that weakness like a strategic poker player. Not showing his true feelings toward the emperor, Talleyrand bided his time, made the right connections, which helped create the most elaborate scheme to dethrone one of the world's most infamous people, Napoleon Bonaparte. These are some strategies to keep in mind during wartime. Reacting rather than directing. Keep others reacting to your movements. Keep them on the defensive. Play their ineffectiveness to stay calm. Aggression versus effective action. Don't waste a lot of energy trying to make your point. Bide your time like Talleyrand. Make the other person come to you. Set the bait. Control the situation. Know your opponent's weakness. He who has control has the power. Master your emotions. Never be influenced through your anger. Aggressive people are never in control. Case in point, during the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, Japan was able to plant false information that made the Russian fleet go 6,000 miles out of the way and force the Russians into hostile territory. The Russian seamen were weak and exhausted by the journey, and although Japan had a weaker naval militia, they planted the bait which gave them the upper hand on the Russians, and needless to say, the Japanese crushed the Russians because of their reaction to the rumor. Now 5 benefits to making your opponents come to you. It is a wise thing to lure your opponent on hostile ground. It is a subtle way to put him on the defensive. Your opponent will be nervous, which will cause him to rush his actions and make mistakes. You want to create the illusion that your opponent is in control of the situation. Oftentimes your opponent's greed, desires, and emotions will be their great motivator, which means that they can be easily led around and or defeated. Getting people to dig their own graves forces their hand and makes you appear powerful and demand respect. Now, is there ever a good time to go to your opponent, you ask? Yes, of course, there is an exception to the rule when you should go to your opponent. Depending on the situation, bait and wait is a wise choice, but taking the lead to attack your opponent can be advantageous as well. The element of surprise does not give the opponent time to think of a counterattack. They are left at your mercy and must respond to your turn. Your biggest issue is to know what tactic to use at the right time to use it. To bait and wait or to strike with force, that is the dilemma. You can be like the bear hunter who lays the honey bait trap. He doesn't exhaust himself and risk his life to find the bear. He lays a trap and waits patiently for the bear to come to him. For if time is not on your side, try quickly to intimidate and control. Choose your approach wisely. Win through your actions, never through arguments. Any momentary triumph you think you gain from argument is really a spirit picture. The resentment and ill will you stir up is stronger and lasts longer than any momentary change of opinion. It is much more powerful to get others to agree with you through your actions, without saying a word. Demonstrate, not explain. Take the example of the engineer in Athens, receiving orders from his commander Lucianus to send the largest ship's mast to use to help in the siege of the town of Perang. The engineer argued that what the commander needed was not the larger mast, but the smaller, which would be better suited for the task. Lucianus was infuriated and sent for the engineer to continue to try to explain his reason for sending the smaller mast. For his disobedience, he was flogged and scorched with rods until he died. The engineer's argument went on deaf ears. Nobody cared whether or not it was more prudent to use the smaller mast. The fact of the matter was that a superior gave a command, and he decided that by insulting the intelligence of his master by arguing was more important. Unlike Michelangelo, the engineer did not exercise the correctness of his ideas indirectly. When Florence's mayor Piero Soderini told Michelangelo that the nose on his sculpture that he had been commissioned to do of a young David with sling in hand was too big, he did not argue that the nose was just right. Michelangelo merely took the mayor onto the scaffolding and gave the appearance of changing the nose. Soderini was pleased and no one was offended. You've definitely heard the old adage, actions speak louder than words. Actions and demonstrations are much more powerful than any rhetoric that one can spew out his mouth. There are no offensive words, no possibility of misinterpretation, no one can argue with demonstrated proof. As Baltasar Gracian remarks, the truth is generally seen, rarely heard. Yet beyond actions, the most powerful persuasion is symbolic. Symbols like a flag or mythic story or monument is something we all understand without the exchanging of one word. Henry Kissinger, who in 1979 suddenly broke off an intense meeting with the Israelis over the return of the Sinai Desert to go sightseeing on an ancient place in Masada. Masada is where 7,000 Jewish warriors were set to commit mass suicide in age 17. Rather than give in to the Roman troops, the Israelis knew that this message was much more than just a warning. It was a significant emotional symbol that made them think far more seriously than any oratorical rhetoric he could have communicated. Choose your battles wisely. Sometimes it is the best thing to assert your enemy and walk away. Then there are other times when the heat of an argument is beneficial to you. On the opposite end of the spectrum, it is advantageous to argue with all the convictions you can muster. The more emotional, the better. Especially when caught in a web of deception, you need to draw the other person into the argument so as to distract him. The basis of a convincing deceptive argument. 1. Being ignorant. Like the con artist Victor Lustig, who sold boxes for $10,000 and claimed that the boxes would make money. When confronted by Sheriff Richards of Ramsey County, Oklahoma, that the box did not work, he acted as if he could not believe it. He went as far as to ask the sheriff if he had operated it properly. This is the way he plays doubt in the mind of the offended party. I mean, that's hilarious. A box that can make money. Put a technical spin or rhetoric on the deception. In the case of Lustig, he was masterful in his wording about the box. This was nothing more than a bunch of technical jibber-jabber that further confused the sheriff, who then let his guard down because of his own insecurity about the function of the box. 3. Offer something for nothing. Lustig offered to give the sheriff his money back and to come back to the town to fix the box, although he knew that the box would never work and the money was not real. He diffused a situation that could have been deadly for him. He had won the argument and was able to get the sheriff jailed for passing counterfeit bills in the process. Law number 10. Infection. Avoid the unhappy and unlucky. You can die from someone else's misery. Emotional states are as infectious as diseases. You may feel you're helping the drowning man, but you're only precipitating your own disaster. The unfortunate sometimes draw misfortune on themselves. They will also draw it on you. Associate with the happy and fortunate instead. The infector possesses an inward instability that radiates outward, drawing disaster to all that they touch. Mary Gilbert, aka Lola Montez of Ireland, was one such person. Lola found herself in the role of a courtesan, prostitute of the royal court. In today's society, Lola would be considered a gold digger. She only sought out men with high social standing in the community that she could use for her own gain. Once she would have her hooks in these establishment, their slow demise began. One of her victims was King Ludwig of Bavaria, who felt compelled to help those. Yet once he was warned of the dangers of his affair with her, he could not seem to resist Lola's aura and almost found his once peaceful country in a state of civil war. It was not until then that the king finally ordered Lola to leave, but a month after she left, King Ludwig was forced to relinquish his throne. There are many men who suffered because of their association with Lola Montez. King Ludwig said that he was bewitched by Lola. Lola was an unstable, incurable, and infectious character type. This is not to say that these characteristics are only restricted to women. This is to say that there are some people whose emotions are so powerful that they infect the very soul of the people that they touch. How to recognize an infector? They draw misfortune upon themselves. They have a turbulent past. They have a long line of broken relationships. They have an unstable career. They have a forceful character that sweeps you up and makes you lose reason. They have a desire to destroy and unsettle, and is chronically dissatisfied. They have great effect on the world around them. And what do you do when you meet one? Don't argue with them, this is part of how they trap you. Don't try to help them no matter what they say. Don't pass the person on to your friends or you will become enmeshed. Flee the infected presence or suffer the consequences. Learn to fear the power of infection. The risk of associating with infectors is that you will waste valuable time and energy trying to free yourself. Through a kind of guilt by association, you will also suffer in the eyes of others. On the other side of the spectrum of infectors are those people who attract happiness through their good cheer, natural buoyancy, and intelligence. They are a source of pleasure, and you must associate with them to share in the prosperity they draw upon themselves. All positive qualities can infect us, but taking advantage of the emotional side of this osmosis may be difficult. Now I put down 5 ways to affect positive change through your associations. If you are miserly by nature, associate with the generous and they will infect you, opening up everything that is tight and restricted needs. Only generous souls attain greatness. If you are gloomy, gravitate to the cheerful. If you are prone to isolation, force yourself to befriend the gregarious. Never associate with those who share your defects. They will reinforce what holds you back. One simple example is the meth head who tries to break out of the cycle of drugs and still just hangs out with his other meth head friends. It's just a very difficult environment. And 5, only create associations with positive affinities. So to quote Balthasar Gracian once again, recognize the fortunate so that you may choose their company and the unfortunate so that you may avoid them. Misfortune is a committed crime of folly, and among those who suffer from it there is no malady more contagious. Never open your door to the least of misfortunes, for if you do, many others will follow in its train. Do not die of another's misery. Law number 11. Learn to keep people dependent on you. To maintain your independence, you must always be needed and wanted. The more you are relied on, the more freedom you have. Make people depend on you for their happiness and prosperity, and you have nothing but fear. Never teach them enough so that they can do without you. Necessity rules the world. People rarely act unless compelled to. If you create no need for yourself, then you will be done away with at the first opportunity. If on the other hand, you understand the laws of power and make others depend on you for their welfare, if you can counteract their weakness with your own iron and blood, as Bismarck said, then you will survive your masters just as he did. You will have all the benefits of power without the thorns that come from being a master. Bismarck understood the importance of keeping people dependent. He sought out the weak ruler Frederick William IV, King of Prussia, and created a relationship of dependency. He was a key player in restoring the king's power so much that when the king died, his brother who preceded him depended on Bismarck as well. Bismarck became their strength, intelligence, and their spine in the process. He became a powerful force to reckon with. He was the man behind the throne, calling the shots. Now, 10 ways to manipulate power. Number 1. Do seek out weak people in power. Seeking out those already in power is foolish. They will swallow you up and spit you out. They do not need anything from you. Number 2. Get people to do as you wish without force or hurt. If you have to bully someone into doing what you want, that is not power. The key is making the person believe that your services are needed, and without you they will be completely lost. Number 3. Enmesh yourself in the work of your superior. By doing this, your superior knows that to get rid of you is futile. They cannot afford to train another without losing time and a lot of money. Number 4. Possess a talent and creative skill that simply cannot be replaced. People think twice before getting rid of you because to get rid of you may spell disaster with death. So exaggerated here, particularly in the office, but in fact that is very much the case. Number 5. Create a situation in which you can always latch on to another patron. This just simply means you have other places that will welcome your skills and talents in your sights. Your employer knows that they cannot easily find another worker with your particular talent, so they will jump hoops to keep you in their employ. Number 6. Have the appearance of specialized knowledge and skill. This gives you leeway in your ability to deceive those above you into thinking they cannot do without you. It is always in your power to make your skills indispensable. Number 7. Wrap yourself around the source of power. You have placed yourself in a position that to cut you away would cause great trauma. You do not necessarily have to entwine yourself around the superior, another person will do, as long as he or she too is indispensable in the chain. Number 8. Use the secret intelligence tactic. By knowing people's secrets, you see your position. The downside to this is that the paranoia and insecurity that the power that it provides cancels itself out. What good is power without peace? Number 9. Do not imagine your superior's dependence on you will make them love you. It is more likely that they resent and fear you. It is better that they fear the consequences of losing you rather than out of love for your company. Number 10. Better to place yourself in a position of mutual dependence. The weakness of making others depend on you is that you are in some manner dependent on them. Although this is true, you will not have the unbearable pressure of being on top, and your superior will in essence be your slave, for he will depend on you. Louis XI, the great Spider King of France, once asked an astrologer to tell of his own fate and how long he had to live. The astrologer replied, "I shall die just 3 days before your majesty." The king was vexed because he had planned to kill the astrologer that day, fearing the astrologer had killed people to prove his forecasting, or that his might in astrology was real and therefore dangerous in of itself. The king spared his life, looked after him, gave him gifts, and even had several doctors check his health to ensure he would live as long as possible. The astrologer actually survived the king by several years, proving his mastery of power. Law number 12. Use selective honesty to disarm your victim. One sincere and honest move will cover over dozens of dishonest ones. Open-hearted gestures of honesty and generosity bring down the guard of even the most suspicious people. Once your selective honesty opens a hole in their armor, you can deceive and manipulate them at will. A timely gift, a Trojan horse, will serve the same purpose. 7 ways you can disarm anyone. Through an act of apparent sincerity and honesty. This is called selective honesty. Who will distrust a person literally caught in the act of being honest? This is an unexpected, well-timed gesture that conflicts the emotions and distracts the one being disarmed, and have the most brutal and cynical beast in the kingdom eating out of your hand. In ancient China, this was called the giving before the taking. The giving makes it hard for the other person to see the taking. Victor Lustig is one of the best examples of this law at work. Lustig was a con man of great distinction, refinement, and culture, and his knowledge of human psychology was his most important characteristic. He was so confident in himself that he was able to con Al Capone, the most feared gangster of his time, out of $5,000. Capone never knew what happened because Lustig disarmed him through selective honesty. Lustig returned $15,000 to Capone for allowing him to take the money in order to double it in 60 days. Lustig took the money and left it in a safety deposit box until the 60 days were over. He went back to Capone, apologized profusely about the deal falling through, and returned the original $50,000. Capone had already pegged Lustig as a con artist, but when Lustig returned the money, it confused Capone and he dropped his guard and gave Lustig $5,000 just for being honest. Number 2. Learn to give before you take. It softens the ground, takes the bite out of a future request, or simply creates a distraction. And the giving can take many forms. An actual gift, a generous act, a kind favor, an honest admission, whatever it takes. Number 3. Use selective honesty on your first encounter with someone. First impressions last a long time. If someone believes you are honest at the start of your relationship, it takes a lot to convince them otherwise. A conman by the name of Lord John Gordon proved to Jay Gould, another conman, phony airy railroad stock. The gold that invested in was the work of top executives at railroad. Gould was so grateful to Gordon that they became friends, buying the controlling interest of the railroad. Gordon betrayed Gould and disappeared. He was a conman, but his initial act of honesty and support had so blinded Gould that it took the loss of millions for him to see through the scheme. Number 4. You must build a reputation for honesty based on a series of acts. Duke Wu of Cheng married off his daughter and killed one of his ministers in order to take over the powerful kingdom of Hu. The ruler of Hu heard that the minister was executed for telling Cheng to conquer the kingdom of Hu. Hu's ruler also considered the marriage of Cheng's daughter and other acts of kindness from Cheng and let down his guard. A few weeks later, Cheng forces swept through Hu and took the country, never to relinquish it. Number 5. Only few people can resist a gift, even from the most hardened enemy, which is why it is often the perfect way to disarm people. A gift brings out the child in us, instantly lowering our defenses. Although we often view other people's actions in the most cynical light, we rarely see the Machiavellian element of a gift, which quite often hides ulterior motives. A gift is the perfect object in which to hide a deception. Number 6. Practice the tactic with caution. Unless you can make the gesture seem sincere and heartfelt, do not play with fire. If people see through it, their disappointed feelings of gratitude and warmth will become their most violent hatred and distrust. And lastly, number 7. It is better to play the role. When you have a history of deceit behind you, no amount of honesty, generosity, or kindness will fool you. In fact, it will only call attention to itself. Once people have come to see you as deceitful, to act honest all of a sudden is simply suspicious. Overt deceptiveness will sometimes cover your tracks, making you admired for the honesty of your dishonest. Law number 13. Asking for help appeals to people's self-interest. You need to turn to an ally for help, not bother to remind him of your past assistance and good deeds. He will find a way to ignore you. Instead, uncover something in your request or in your alliance with him that will benefit him and emphasize it out of all proportion. He will respond enthusiastically when he sees something he gains for himself. Self-interest is the lever that moves people. The art of asking people for help depends on your ability to understand the person you're dealing with, and not to confuse your needs with theirs. Know that even the most powerful person is locked inside needs of his own, and that if you make no appeal to his self-interest, he merely sees you as a desperate or, at best, a waste of time. What not to do when making your appeal. Number 1. Don't bring up the past. Bringing up the past, whether good or bad, will not help you in your cause. The justice and nobility of your cause will not prevail. Not only is a man not obliged to be grateful, gratitude is often a terrible burden that he gladly discards. It is best to speak pragmatically to pragmatic people. People rarely act against their own interests. Like in the case of the Corcyraeans and the Corinthians, who were at the brink of war with one another. They both wanted to win over the Athenians as an ally, because to do so would surely win the war. Both sides would send representatives to plead their case to the Athenians. The Corcyraean representative could only offer one thing, and that was an alliance with mutual interests to create a formidable force that could legitimate the rival state of Sparta. The representative from Corinth only talked about the past relationship with Athens and went on to list their many services for women performed for Athens and the importance of showing gratitude to one's friends. Needless to say, the Athenians were offended by the Corinthian ambassador by his subtle way of asking them to feel guilty about past generosity. The Athenians could have cared less and allied with the Corcyraeans. Number 2. Don't be trapped in your own wants and desires. Do not start from the assumption that the people you are appealing to have a selfless interest in helping you. Don't talk as if your needs matter to people. They probably could care less, especially referring to larger issues, a great cause or grand emotions such as love and gratitude, when simple everyday realities would have much more appeal. When the Dutch began to arrive in Japan in great numbers, Ieyasu, the Japanese emperor, was much relieved. He needed Europeans for their know-how in guns and navigation, and here at last were Europeans who cared nothing for spreading religion. The Dutch wanted only to trade. Ieyasu swiftly moved to evict the Portuguese, who were desperately trying to convert the Japanese people to Catholicism. From then on, he would only deal with the practical-minded Dutch. Japan and Holland were vastly different cultures, but each shared a timeless and universal concern: self-interest. Number 3. Don't confuse your needs with others. Once you make people see how you can in some way meet their needs or advance their cause, their resistance to your request for help will magically fall away. At each step on the way to acquiring power, you must train yourself to think your way inside the other person's mind, to see their needs and interests, to get rid of the screen of your own feelings that obscure the truth. Master this art and there will be no limits to what you can accomplish. The motivation for most people is superiority. Believe it or not, there are people who are not motivated through cynical self-interests. These are people who thrive on opportunities to display their good heart. They prefer to be able to exercise charity, mercy, and justice, which are their ways of feeling superior to you. Because of their superior position, if you ask this person for help, you emphasize their power and position. The only requirement from you is that all of this is done in public. The more public, the better. It is truly their pleasure to give and to be seen giving. They are dying to fund your project, to introduce you to powerful people. This is the wine that intoxicates them. You must have the wisdom to distinguish the differences among powerful people and figure out what makes them tick. When they use greed, do not appeal for their charity. When they want to look charitable and noble, do not appeal to their greed. This thought is crazy important in everyday tasks. I assure you, at first I had trouble seeing it as well, but then I realized that my friends and even my family think this way. Of course not always, but if you have a request, appeal to their self-interest. Law number 14. Open the brand, you can advise. Always be reliable with your advice to get valuable information. That's my head having still made it by yourself. Polite social channels, learn to grow, asking direct questions to get these business deliveries mentions. There is no way that is not an opportunity to go on to find. 5 reasons to seek what defines that they will. You can gain some valuable information. You will know their comings and goings, changes in taste and other such tidbits as education and looking prices. You will appear to be all-knowing because you will be one step ahead of your competition. With knowledge of your market proposal that you see charms so well that you anticipate their desire. At best, no one sees the source of your power, and what they do not see they cannot find. But there's also a few risks connected to hiring spies. You have little control over the people of your work. Perhaps they will inaptly expose you spying, and they may secretly turn against you. Therefore, you are fixated on the art of spying. Most of the friends who are secretly gathering information, you will think that you genuinely like them and mistake your implicit friendship. Learn to possess the ability to address your thoughts in conversation. Speak only when necessary. Learn to make public